and try to capitalize on Esper's mana base. And Mono Blue Devotion, particularly Master of Waves, is very punishing against those types of decks.
Definitely. So here we have both players. It looks like Erik Smith is going to be on the draw here. Both players kept their opening 7, and Tom Ross leads with a Temple of Abandon.
So to give you a sampling of Tom's creature base here, Burning Emissary, Skylasher, Goreclan Rampager, Rakdos Cackler, Fire Drinker Satyr, Legion Loyalist, Fanatic of Xenagos, and Ash Zealot. So this is a very aggressive take on green-red aggro.
Yeah, unfortunately, pretty slow start considering his creature base. He leads no creature in play by turn 2. He does have a Mutavault, but again, not the ideal start for him against a Esper control deck. Looks like we're going to have a turn 3 Fanatic of Xenagos. This is a card that we kind of, when it was previewed, we thought might have an impact on Standard, but hasn't really shown up that much.
Yeah, I think that, you know, the red-green decks that have been successful in tournament-level Magic lately have been green-red monster strategies where this card's kind of out of place, but certainly in a deck like Tom's, it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, so Erik plays 3 come into play tap lands in a row, has access to black, blue, and white, and Tom finally gets a creature on the board. Let's see if it's going to be able to actually deal damage to Erik, or does Erik have an Azorius Charm or a Doomblade? So
even though Tom's draw is on the slower side here, you can at least understand the philosophy that's going on here. He's trying to get out in front of these decks and kill them or present lethal before they're able to get their really powerful stuff going.
So it looks like 6 damage. It does go through, and now Rakdos Cackler joins the board. And does Erik have a Supreme Verdict? So it looks like he is going to play something. Is it going to be Supreme? Yes, Supreme Verdict. So he takes 2 from the Watery Grave, but he's able to wipe off all the creatures on Tom's side of the board. So
now it's really critical for Tom to have a powerful follow-up here. He does have Mutavault, really critical tool for beating control decks.
Yeah, so it looks like he's getting a lot of land. He doesn't play that many land, only 21, but he has 5 mana. One of them is that Mutavault, but he's able to play another Fanatic of Xenagos here, and he still can activate Mutavault and attack. So I believe Erik's life total is probably at 12 right now.
Correct.
He took 6 last turn and then 2 from the Watery Grave.
Yeah.
So Tom can drop him down to 10 here. He's got that 4-power Fanatic that came into play, and I think he might have a Lightning Strike in his hand too. So.
And you can see Erik with Obsidat in hand, but unable to cast it because he doesn't have a 5th land that comes into play untapped. Really a good example of the struggles that Esper mana base can have at times against very aggressive strategies.
And speaking of interesting card choices, Armed and Dangerous and Goreclan Rampager make short work. Funny note, you guys did not hear it, but before we brought this match on camera, Patrick actually asked for the Oracle text on Armed and Dangerous, so we have that ready for you. Target creature gets +1/+1 and gains double strike until end of turn. That is the red side of the card, and most likely that is the only side of the card that Tom will ever really cast. He was able to give his Fanatic double strike and +1/+1, and then the Rampager obviously pumped it even more. So Tom was able to do, I believe, 16 points of damage in 1 turn.
Yeah, and that's
even through a Jace activation.
That's a pretty incredible demonstration of Tom's range there. And his draw was pretty poor. Did nothing for the first 2 turns of the game. It was looking like he was going to be in trouble there, but he had sort of a combo element there that maybe Erik wasn't anticipating, and Tom takes game 1.
Yeah, it's like his cards like Titan Strength and Goreclan Rampager and Armed and Dangerous that can, you know, there's these pump spells that can, out of nowhere, even after Supreme Verdict, if you just have a Mutavault in play, can suddenly do a lot of damage. So Tom Ross, despite a very slow start, was able to pull off the first game upset.
So going on to the sideboards here, I have Tom Ross's in front of me. He has another copy of Armed Dangerous, 2 in the main deck, and then 1 on the board. 2 Skullcracks, a Ranger's Guile, a Basic Forest, 3 copies of Domrad, 2 Magma Jets, 3 Searing Bloods, and 2 Shocks. I definitely anticipate the Planeswalkers coming in. I expect the additional Forest to come in as well. I imagine that's 4 matchups where he's bringing in his 3-mana Planeswalker. I think Ranger's Guile here is a reasonable include. You're going to be looking at Detention Spheres, some number of Doomblade effects, and 2 copies of Skullcrack as well. So I imagine that Tom will de-emphasize a little bit his pump spells. They're not really that well situated for this matchup. Particularly Madcap skills really exposes him to getting 2-for-1s, and try to bring in some more stable sources of card advantage.
Yeah, and on Erik's side of the board, he has not too many cards against a hyper-aggressive deck like this. He definitely prepared more for the mirror. He has 1 copy of Pod Needle, 1 copy of Gainsay, 2 Duress, 2 Doomblade, 2 Negate, one Ashiok Nightmare Weaver, which he has 2 in his main deck actually, 1 Revoke Existence, 2 Blind Obedience, 2 Dispel, and 1 Jace Memory Adept. Obviously, Blind Obedience is a pretty reasonable card in this matchup. He doesn't know how many haste creatures Tom has, but you definitely bring in 2 copies of Blind Obedience. The Piety Needle probably comes in too, just because it's a way to kind of turn off Mutavault, which can be problematic for Esper control. And obviously 2 copies of Doomblade can come in as well. But beyond that, I don't really see a lot of other cards I'd want in this particular matchup.
Yeah, it's interesting because I actually think Ashiok's pretty reasonable against Ross's deck, as it's realistic for Erik to flip over a 2-mana creature like Ash Zealot, like Skylasher, play that the following turn. It requires some amount of resources for Ross to expend, but based on what Erik saw that game, I don't know if he necessarily believes that to be the case. I think Blind Obedience is especially well suited for this matchup from Erik's side, even though you didn't see a lot in the way of haste creatures, especially after you see the Armed Dangerous Gore Clan Rampager combo kill. He has to be really wary of haste creatures, and he can reasonably anticipate that Tom has a lot of these in his deck because clearly there's some tools in his deck that are quite powerful alongside haste creatures.
And not only that, but he could have to deal with Hammer Perforos, which is certainly a reasonable thing to expect out of a deck like this.
Absolutely.
We know that Tom doesn't have it, but that doesn't mean that Erik doesn't. So both players, it looks like they're ready to present to their opponents. How do you kind of see this going after board? I mean, obviously you mentioned Ashiok. Probably not an amazing card in this matchup, but I'm kind of with you. It could randomly be it could be okay just because it's a way for you to get a blocker potentially in play early on.
I'm curious. It depends what kind of cards Erik wants to sideboard out. His exact permission suite might guide some of this. He's playing 4 main deck copies of Thoughtseize. Maybe he doesn't want all of those as well.
Yeah, so it looks like Erik's going to mulligan his first hand. He had a lot of clunkers in there. It looks like he had an Obsidian and maybe 2 land, along with the Sphinx of Revelation, but not much else. He really needs those early spells like Doomblade and Azorius Charms to Devour Flesh to kind of interact with Tom's side of the board early on. Otherwise, he just won't be able to get to those late game spells anyway.
Yeah, and I think this tournament right now may represent the equilibrium or the tipping point where we've gone too far down the Esper path, and it's possible that decks like mono red aggro, mono black aggro, red green aggro that you see in Ross's hands are really good calls for this tournament. There's decks that are going to 12 Scry lands on top of a bunch of Ravnica duels. They stumble out of the gates on occasion to add more power to their deck to fight the mirror match, and really linear aggressive strategies might be well suited to capitalize.
So Erik leads with a Temple of Silence here, and he's going to scry the card to the bottom of his library. Tom looks like he has Stomping Ground. He's going to pay 2, kind of untap, and Fire Drinker Satyr enters play. So a little better start than last time. But again, it didn't matter last game. So so Erik has yet another Scry land, so not really much you can interact with right now. Tom does have that Mutavault again. Only has 2 copies of Mutavault in his main deck.
Yeah, but his mana base is a little bit more stretched than, say, mono red or mono black aggro, so he can't afford a bunch of Mutavaults, but really excellent for him to draw one on top of Stomping Ground, allows him to cast everything in his deck and have a Mutavault to threaten Erik.
So it looks like Erik's debating, and he did keep the card on top of his library. It looks like he has a Devour Flesh in his hand as well. So that could get cast in response to the Skylasher, depending on what he's more afraid of. Obviously, Fire Drinker Satyr can pump. So maybe he's going to definitely cast Devour Flesh, whether or not he doesn't respond. So it looks like, yes, he is more afraid of the Fire Drinker Satyr.
Yeah, no reason to give Ross a choice there. Fire Drinker Satyr more threatening, although Skylasher cannot be contained by Detention Sphere or Azorius Charm, whereas Fire Drinker Satyr can. So the 2 creatures pretty close in quality to one another, and Erik doesn't really want to open up a decision point for Ross there.
It looks like Tom has one of your favorite cards ever made, Legion Loyalist, in his hand, although he leads with the Fire Drinker Satyr instead and attacks with the Mutavault.
Yeah, Legion Loyalist is a sweet inclusion in Tom's deck because he's so much in the way of creature pump to amplify it, Madcap skills, and Titan Strength. It's also a way for this deck to win the game the turn after the opponent casts Elspeth, which is really critical. Hard to win on the ground sometimes against Elspeth, but Legion Loyalist makes it pretty easy.
And Erik does have that Elspeth in his hand, but he's only have 4 mana. He has a Sphinx of Revelation in his hand, but he doesn't have much else here. So it looks like he might have 1 Doomblade. So he's going to kill the Mutavault, but he's still going to take 5 damage this turn.
And Tom going full throttle here doesn't really respect the possibility of Supreme Verdict at this point because Erik most likely would have played it last turn, trying to put the pedal to the metal and end the game as quickly as possible.
Yeah, it looks like Tom scried and decided he didn't want that card on top of his library. And wow, pretty good draw there. It's not Supreme Verdict, but it is Jace, which can limit some of the damage he takes next turn.
Yeah, the This is the problem with Legion Loyalists in the control matchup. Very good against Elspeth, quite poor against Jace.
So it looks like he drew a Rampager, and he does have a Titan strength as well. So this might be enough. Let's see here. Everything gets shrink down, so he's only take 3, 7, 8. Yep, that is exactly. It's going to be 10 damage there. Titans, timely Gorkland Rampager from Tom there, and he's able to defeat Eric Smith 2-0 in this matchup. And this is kind of what we thought about. We thought in response to all the Esper decks out there, you're going to see two things. You're going to see people play Esper but gear their decks to beat the mirror, or you're going to see people play hyper aggressive decks that take advantage of those Esper decks.